Israel Update with Gadi Taub and Mike Duran. Hello and welcome to Tablet's Israel Update. It's the 12th of March. It's been 1 year, 5 months, and 5 days since this war began, and we are in the middle of a ceasefire and a kind of a lull, waiting to see if phase one of the hostage deal will be extended. I'm Gadi Taub in Tel Aviv, and the co-host of this show is the director of the Center for Peace and Security in the Middle East. Peace is not going so well, but security possibly. And his name is Mike Duran. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Gadi. How are you?
I'm doing well. Shall we start?
Are you as sane as possible under the circumstances?
The circumstances have become more hospitable to sanity, and so I can testify that I am. Relative to what they were. I think we should. How do you say litfoch לעצמנו על השכם?
I have no idea. I didn't understand it. I'm embarrassed to say.
It's to congratulate ourselves.
To pat ourselves on the back?
To pat on the back. לתפוח על השכם. השכם is this part of your anatomy, and it means to congratulate yourselves. And
yeah, pat yourself on the back.
And I think, oh, you do say pat yourself on the back. So yeah. I think we should, as it pertains to sanity, because now it's relatively easy. I remember the really dark times at the beginning of this war, and our determination not to sink into the general depression, especially of conservative media outlets. I think we've been a beacon of sanity, possible sanity. Let's hear what the headlines are, and then we can analyze the news.
All right. So, topping the news, Gadi, is the violence between government and security forces, government security forces and gunmen loyal to the ousted regime of Assad in Syria. They erupted last Thursday, and they've been ongoing in one way or another. Over 1,300 people have died since the clashes began, many of them civilians killed by the pro-government forces. Following the chaos in Syria, Israel took steps to increase its own security in the Golan Heights along the Israel-Syria border. On Tuesday, Defense Minister Katz visited the border and declared to the media that, quote, every morning when al-Jolani opens his eyes at the presidential palace in Damascus, he will see the IDF watching him from the peak of the Hermon, unquote. On Tuesday, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, that's Trump's special envoy, joined negotiations in Qatar between Israel and Hamas for an extension of the ceasefire and release of more hostages. The past week, Israel halted electricity supply to the Gaza Strip until more hostages are set free. Also, in a statement yesterday, Morgan Ortagus, President Trump's deputy Middle East envoy, said that the United States was bringing Israel and Lebanon together to discuss the demarcation of the border. She said discussions will also focus on the future of 5 Israeli military outposts in Lebanon and of Lebanese prisoners still held in Israel after the ceasefire deal last year, which largely halted more than a year of cross-border warfare. On last Thursday, President Trump stated in an interview that he had sent a letter to the Iranian regime informing it that if it did not negotiate to end their nuclear program, the United States would act militarily. He said later to reporters that, quote, we're down to the final strokes with Iran. That's going to be an interesting time, and we'll see what happens. But we're down to the final moments. Final moments. Can't let them have a nuclear weapon. Unquote. Over to you, Gadi.
So a little about what's going on in Israel. We discussed last time the inquiries, the internal inquiries by the Shabak and the IDF, the Shin Bet and the IDF, and we said here very clearly that these were cover-ups and attempts to point at the elected official, and especially, of course, at Netanyahu. I think I also said that Ronen Bar, the head of Shin Bet, who refuses to leave his seat, is taking a page from the James Comey book, and this is, I think, the reason for what we now call here Qatargate, the investigation into the dealings of Netanyahu's staff, allegedly, with the Qatari regime. We don't know much about it. Apparently, or at least the charge or the suspicion is that they have taken money for doing PR work for the Qatari regime. There's a gag order, so we can't tell much else about it. But the way Shabak is behaving and Ronen Bar is behaving is becoming more and more atrocious. Mike, you mentioned last time that he made political conditions before he would leave, which are not the business of a secret police anywhere, to make demands, political demands of the government that they are supposed to obey. And now there is something even more outrageous. Former heads of Shabak using, biased is not strong enough a word, but I'll use that, biased media outlets who are willing to be conduits of mafia-like threats, saying, if you remove Ronen Bar, remember that we have very damning information about your son and your family in general. Two separate journalists conveyed this mafiosi threat, and Ronen Bar, the sitting head of Shabak, did not deny anything. He did not participate in the threats, or at least not overtly, but he never disowned them. And so this has been causing quite a stir outside the mainstream media, who are willing to support and swallow anything against Netanyahu. But these people who now say that Netanyahu has no right to move to fire the head of Shabak because this is a threat to democracy. It's a politicization of law enforcement and whatnot. And these people are imagining, I think, an Egyptian-style regime where the army is in charge and elected politicians better beware not to defy it. So they are preparing for this. Also happens in the background. Yariv Levin has been moving to remove the hostile Attorney General.
The Justice Minister.
The Justice Minister, Yariv Levin, has been initiating a move to remove the Attorney General who is in Israel. Well, Mike, I think I find it very difficult to explain to Americans how robust, how strong, how powerful the Attorney General is in Israel. You want to give it a go?
I believe we did an explainer one time, but there's no equivalent. Very quickly, we should actually do an explainer sometime, but there's no equivalent in the United States because the Attorney General has formal powers, but then informal powers, which are universally recognized, but hard to pinpoint. In terms of the law, every ministry has a legal advisor to the ministry, and those legal advisors to the ministries are legal counsels, I guess you'd say, to the ministries, are effectively under the control of the Attorney General. So they represent the Attorney General to the ministries rather than help the ministries make their case legally to the Attorney General. So but
the crazy thing we have to add is that they have veto power over policy.
Well, that's what I was about to say. So they effectively become a political, let's say, a policy-making organization above the policy-making organizations, because they have veto power over any policy, and the legal advisors can simply say, "I will not," to their minister, "I will not defend you on this before the Supreme Court." And so this system of Supreme Court, Attorney General, and legal advisors in the ministries becomes a government within the government.
Exactly. And so this Attorney General is clearly part of the inter-sphere coalition against Netanyahu. By inter-sphere, I mean the public sphere, the press, the bureaucracy, the high brass, the leftist politicians. And you explained it, I think, very well, Mike. I tried to explain it on Mark Levin's show this weekend, and Americans think that you must be fantasizing when you.
Well, it sounds like it sounds like this is, of course, what they did over here as well when all of the legal maneuvering against Trump began. Is that people roll their eyes when you suggest that there's, when Russiagate began, and whenever I would go on TV and say that the Steele dossier is a tissue of lies, that people would start rolling their eyes and saying, "Oh, this is this is a conspiracy theory you're engaging in."
Yeah, I trying to write about the Russia hoax here in Israel, I suffered exactly the same fate. The mainstream press labeled me a conspiracy theory, and the sad things the sad thing with these things, Mike, is now that everybody knows that we were right, nobody goes back to correct the record and say that we are not conspiracy theorists, because you get the label, and then that's the way they avoid answering your arguments. But
you won the argument when people stop talking about it. But they never come back and say you got that right.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will remember the resentment toward you.
Exactly, Thomas
even after they adopt your position.
Thomas Sowell said, I think rightly, people would forgive you for being wrong, but they will not forgive you for being right, and that's exactly the case. So in this, while Shabak is threatening Netanyahu with mafiosi threats about revealing private information. Remember, Mike, these people are avtachat ishim. They are also what do you call it in America? It's usually the Secret Service, but the people who are protecting.
Just say the personal protection units, I guess you'd say, something like that.
So the personal protection unit goes under your skin. They live with you. They know a lot of intimate details, and so Shabak is now threatening to use accumulated embarrassing details about Netanyahu's family, and Netanyahu came out against it very, very strongly. In one, recently he does these things, and he said, the Qatar gate is complete fake news. And secondly, if they think, he said, they will threaten me with revealing things about my family, we are not afraid. And this will not stop me from doing what's right. But he has not removed Ronen Bar still, and not the Attorney General. The Attorney General, it's more complicated because he signed before the Supreme Court a commitment not to have anything to do with judicial affairs so long as his trial is going on, because supposedly he has a conflict of interests here. So we have all this going on, and now there is a new chief of staff, and people are looking at that and saying, if you look at this mafia of former Shabak heads, and also Herzi Halevi, who has been undermining the ability of the state controller.
Herzi Halevi,
chief of staff,
the outgoing chief of staff. He's now the retired chief of staff.
So Herzi Halevi was also undermining the government. He also made political speeches. He also undermined the ability of the state controller, who has the authority to investigate October 7. We spoke about this in various ways. He tried to stop it by going to the Attorney General. So you see, these are all part of I don't want to say deep state. Let's just say the higher bureaucracy, or the permanent bureaucracy, or the administrative state, and they act in unison. And then comes a new chief of staff, Eyal Zamir, and one of the first things that he does is fire Daniel Hagari. Daniel Hagari is a general and is the IDF spokesperson who became a hero of the left because he kept using his podium to criticize the government. So he too is part of this same upper echelon bureaucracy that they are all covering for each other. And then comes Eyal Zamir, and he fires his PR person. That's the tiniest thing to do. And that's the obvious thing to do, right? Your PR person is supposed to be something personal and someone you have personal confidence in. So he replaces Daniel Hagari. He doesn't throw him out the army. He replaces him, and the press goes into a complete tantrum.
I miss that. When did this happen?
A few days ago, I think I spoke about it on Friday.
And is there any effort to stop any? There's no legal effort to stop Zamir from doing this, right?
No, but this is what we call knock on roof. This is
a warning, a shot across the bow.
This is a warning because the real problem is how to remove the Attorney General of the Army, which has been tying the IDF's hands in myriad ways in fighting this war. So people are looking to Eyal Zamir and thinking, maybe he is not going to be more loyal to the permanent bureaucracy than to the government that he is supposed to serve. But look what is happening, Mike, because the press, what it does is it tries to condition you. So when Netanyahu, for instance, appointed Roni Elshech, who was deputy head of Shabak, he was appointed chief of Israeli police. He was considered, he's a religious guy with a knitted yarmulke. He is Mizrahi. We supposed he was leaning to the right in his opinions, but we didn't know. He came from outside the police, and the press just battered him again and again and again until he hired a very expensive PR person. And then, lo and behold, he turned on Netanyahu. He supported the investigations against Netanyahu. He came out repeatedly to the press, like James Comey did, against Netanyahu, and suddenly he became a hero. And suddenly he was, he got cover stories in the daily press. And so everybody here is tense, waiting to see if the new IDF chief of staff is going to buckle under the same kind of pressure and turn against the government of Israel to find favor with the junta, with the press, the permanent bureaucracy, and the left.
Okay, I dug up some polling here. Channel 13 News held a poll. And
that's almost a contradiction in terms.
Okay, I know. You will assume it's a biased poll, but it's still interesting, okay? Mm-hmm. So, are you for or against talks between the United States and Hamas to free hostages? That's the United States is now talking directly to Hamas, right? So, for 57%, against 23%. Who is looking out more for the hostages, Netanyahu or Trump? Trump, 50%, Netanyahu, 29%, don't know, 21%. Are you for or against firing Attorney General Gali, I can never say her name.
Gali
Baharav Miara. It's such a hard name for me to say. For, 39%, against, 53%, don't know, 18%. Finally, are you for or against firing Ronen Bar? For, 38%, against, 39%, don't know, 23%. So if this poll is reflective of anything, it's very interesting that this effort to protect Ronen Bar is not doing very well because of all the issues before the public, there was less support for the effort to keep him in place than anyone else.
And as I said on the previous show, I think we are gradually coming to realize that Ronen Bar is the single most important decision maker in the night of the disaster. He is responsible for not raising the level of alert because
Shabak has responsibility for Gaza and Yehuda v'Shomron.
Yeah, and his appeasement frame of mind said that we should not raise the alert because this can drag us into accidental escalation because that will he just assumed that Hamas has peaceful intentions and is only getting ready for an Israeli attack. That's the frame of mind of the head of the Shabak. This is the grandeur of the failure. And what struck me, Mike, from the statistics you read, is the opposite. How come there are still 39% who think Ronen Bar should stay? He should be rolled in tar and feathers and have the scarlet letter on his forehead for the rest of his life. He is supposed to be apologizing, and I wrote something even more rude on Twitter, saying, does anybody know why Ronen Bar has not committed harakiri? That was an attempt to provoke, because that was after this man, who is responsible for the greatest disaster in Israel's history, is now clinging to his chair and manipulating the inquiry in order to exonerate himself. That is the most shameful thing you can do, and also very, very stupid, because we will find out the truth. Too many people are involved. This is too important. There will be no ability to cover this up. This is not the Kennedy assassination, Mike. This is not something that hangs on a single point. This is a huge thing, and the responsible parties would be found out. So I'll just end with saying that the most encouraging sign is that after Herzi Halevi deliberately subverted the state comptroller from studying what happened on the night of October 7th, because Herzi Halevi is obviously one of the responsible parties, now the new chief of staff has cleared the way for the state comptroller to investigate whatever he wants. We had an angry letter from the state comptroller complaining about Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi, that he is more or less threatening people who come to testify by sending him with a chaperone from the Chief of Staff's office, and also secretly recording the interviews. This is outrageous. And if we had a functioning press instead of a cheerleading faction for the anti-Netanyahu crowd, people would be calling him out on that. And while all this is happening, Mike, the hostage deal is now in a lull, and Syria is on fire. Let's skip from the deal to the mediation to Syria, if you can.
Yeah, let's talk about Syria first, and then we'll go to the. I think what we should do, we'll talk about Syria, and then we'll talk about Trump's policy toward Gaza, Lebanon, and Iran. How's that?
That's good. Yeah.
Syria, the last Thursday, as I mentioned, there was a rebellion by regime remnants in the coastal provinces. That's Latakia and Tartus, where the Alawites are concentrated. The Alawites being the sect from which the Assad regime drew its greatest support. Assad was an Alawite, and the regime remnant.
His support is not exactly this. This was a tyranny of an Alawite minority, basically.
Yes, yeah. Well, I say that because I don't think the average Alawite in the coastal areas had much choice. You know, the regime was Alawite, and that gave you as an Alawite, certain options in terms of the military and so forth. But the average Alawite, I don't think, was treated much better than the average Sunni or anything else. Did you follow what I mean?
Yeah. But from the Alawite minority came the ruling class.
Yes. Yeah. Well, the ruling class was always. The ruling class was always a mix, because Syria is so diverse, and in order to rule all of these different areas, you had to have representatives in the regime from those areas. That's why you had a Ba'ath party. The Ba'ath party was the mechanism by which you drew in you created the ruling elite, but the inner core, the core of the ruling elite was Alawite. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So anyway, there were regime remnants launched a rebellion against the current interim government, which then the interim government then called for a jihad over all the mosques of Syria, and the jihadis came to the coastal provinces and started fighting the regime remnants, but also carrying out horrendous slaughter of civilians. Like I said, about 1,300 have been killed. The response in pro-Israel circles here in Washington, and also in a lot of other places, has been to say that the Muslim Brotherhood or Al Qaeda alumnus in Damascus is launching a jihad against minorities, and you heard a lot of that coming out of Israel as well, combined with claims that what Israel and the United States should do is they should be working for a decentralized Syria with autonomous regions for minorities. I've been strongly against that, Gadi, and getting a kind of criticism that you're well familiar with from my arguments with Don Shuftan and others about Turkey. And the argument that you and I had about Hamas and so on. Anyone who's reading,
you had a tweet that was a very analytic challenge to people who say that. Why don't you repeat your questions? Because you said anyone who supports this idea of a federation of minorities should answer these questions.
Yes, I remember that tweet. I don't remember all the questions necessarily, but basically one question was, what authority is going to actually oversee this decentralized Syria? Who's going to impose that on Shara, who's now the guy de facto in charge in Damascus? That's number one. Number two, who's going to decide where the lines are and impose these lines about autonomous areas? Syria is a very diverse place. All these towns and cities in Syria are mixed to one degree or another. So how are you going to create these, or regions are mixed? How are you going to create these homogeneous or nearly homogeneous regions without causing a lot more sectarian fighting and creating much more turmoil? Who's going to create stability in this system over the long term? How are you going to do that? Those are just very practical questions like this, and to which I get the answer. I get the answer. You are Erdogan's shill, Mike. Come clean. How much money are you getting from the Turks? I'm a little bit. I get this actually, in one form or another, from people who should know better, because these are just practical questions, and there's a desire to denounce. I mean, what's happening on the coast in Syria is very, it's horrendous, it's ugly. Watching people be brutalized by men with guns is, it's stomach churning, and so on. But the question is, what practically can be done about it? And what are the consequences of any proposed action that you're making? And I don't think people are thinking. About this step by step. For example, you heard a lot of Israelis, including Israelis who should know better, saying that there needs to be Israel needs to protect the Kurds against the Turks
that was a corollary to Israel should protect the
Alawites.
Not the Alawites. The Alawites.
The Druze.
First of all, the Druze, because we have a Druze population which is very loyal and which serves in the army, and they are kin of the Druze in Syria.
So let me tell you what I think. When you hear Israeli officials or people who are close to Israeli officials talking this way, let me tell you what I think they're saying actually, and then I'll tell you why I think it is a dangerous way of talking. Okay?
Okay.
Israel has effectively put the Druze of southern Syria under their protective umbrella. and they have created a buffer. The Israeli military has created a buffer zone in southern Syria. Now, there's a lot of Sunnis in southern Syria too, as well, by the way. But they have who are under the in the zone that Israel has put under its its protective umbrella. So I think when the Israelis see sectarian violence in a place like Latakia, they want to highlight that for their own home, their domestic audience, for the Americans. But also, it's a statement to Turks and to Jolani. Just as Katz said, Jolani, you should be aware, we're sitting on the Hermon and we can see Damascus every day. So it's a kind of a warning to Erdogan and to Jolani that we're going to protect our little sectarian enclave in the south, the Druze in the south. But they said it in terms of protecting minorities in the whole country, and the Israelis have apparently established some kind of relations with the YPG, that is the PKK in northeast Syria, as well.
Make a pause here, Mike, to explain to those of our viewers and listeners who are not who don't remember the details of your argument with Dan Shiftan. So let me just sum up the basic assumptions. There is the Biden regime supported the PKK in North Syria.
Obama and Biden, and Trump never reversed it. He was inclined to reverse it, but he never did. The PKK wants to bust up Turkey into two states, a Turkish state and a Kurdish state. And so this is like
a thorn on Turkey's side, and this is not just Erdogan, as you explain. This is against the state interest of Turkey, no matter what the regime is.
No matter who's in charge.
The YPJ is an offshoot of the PKK. YPG is an offshoot of the PKK, and they are in central eastern Syria.
Northeast Syria.
Northeastern Syria. And
right on the Turkish border.
If you remember the map, that's bordering Iraq. And so they are closer to us, and so it is tempting for Israel, who has tensions with Turkey, to support the YPG and by proxy the PKK as a buffer against Turkey. But you have been saying this is a foolish policy. Why?
Well, note what they're saying really. When they say, when Israelis or pro-Israelis say that there needs to be a decentralized regime in Syria where the minorities are protected and have autonomy, they're saying the United States should do that. This is the issue. So it's a call for a certain American policy. So quite in addition to the fact of whether it annoys the Turks, and I do think it's a mistake to go after the Turks in this way, but the most important thing here is that the United States itself is not going to support this. This goes against the general inclinations of the Trump administration. And it didn't get as much gaudy attention as it should have, that on Monday, this is Thursday, the violence on the coast began. All of these people said we need to have autonomous regions for the minorities. And then on Monday, it was announced that the YPG has come to an agreement with Jolani about moving the forces of the YPG up under the centralized government of Syria. So there couldn't be a stronger statement that this is that events in Syria are moving in the opposite direction towards centralization under Shara's interim government rather than decentralization. But more important than that, Gadi, it should be obvious that the United States supports this. Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, put out a tweet saying it was a good thing. After he had denounced the sectarian violence, he put out a tweet saying that this agreement with the YPG was a good thing. And CENTCOM, this is the U.S. Central Command, which arms, trains, and equips the YPG and which loves them, put out a tweet recognizing what Secretary Rubio said. So, in other words, very quietly, but in a very concerted way, the Trump administration is starting to pull the plug on the YPG. So the call, forget about everything else. The call for a decentralized Syria and a Kurdish autonomous region, it fails the basic test of any policy, which is, does it have a chance of succeeding? No, it doesn't.
And that's a very convincing argument. I would ask you to add, Mike, at least a word on your general policy recommendation here, because you have been adamant in saying that it is possible to align Turkish and Israeli interest in Syria.
Yes, I continue to believe that, but this requires the United States to see its role. I don't think the Turks and the Israelis will get there together. The friction between them is too great. The fall of Assad means that the Turks and the Israelis are now bumping up against each other in Syria, and it comes as no surprise to you, Turks and Israelis don't like each other these days. Or at least this Turkish government and this Israeli government don't like each other.
That's a very mild way of putting it.
And they don't
support Hamas. They
don't trust each other. So, but the United States can play an intermediating role here if it sees it that as its role in the region. Just like during the Cold War, the United States played an intermediating role between the Saudis and the Israelis. The Saudis and the Israelis hated each other all during the Cold War, and the United States could ride both horses because it understood that its job was to keep them apart and make sure that there isn't too much friction between them. Now, will the Trump administration see this as its role? I hope so. But that's what we should be advocating. Instead of advocating that the United States should go in and bust up Syria, topple Jolani, and so on. None of this is going to happen, Gadi. It's not going to happen. We're not going to rebuild Syria. We're not going to turn it into something other than what it is.
But let me also challenge you, Mike. First of all, the people's response to your stance on this have also been emotional, because people look at these horrors, especially in Israel, and guess what it reminds them of? They remember October 7. They remind themselves that we are living in a wild region with barbarians who I have a few media channels. I got some videos of atrocities, some from Gaza and some from Syria, and that I can't post. I was going to, it's interesting you say that, because I was going to, for the dumbest take, it would be very hard viewing, but I was going to put a clip that came out of Syria of the Jolani aligned forces abusing Alawites in the back of a pickup truck on the coast. And I wanted by abusing, you mean torturing to death, or just humiliating?
Humiliating, but violently, and you don't know, they're packed in the back of a truck, and you don't know what fate awaits them. But they were slapping them and kicking them, and at gunpoint hitting them with their guns, and so on. I wanted to put it as the dumbest take because it's gone all around the web as Shara's forces abusing Christians.
Yeah,
right. Which is not what's happening. They're not abusing Christians. There have been maybe 4 or 5 Christians who've died in this violence, but it's all over the web. The numbers wildly inflated. I had an Israeli who should know better and who's very much outside of government, but closely intertwined with the security forces, security establishment, telling me about the many thousands of people who have been killed. I saw something else by a colleague here in Washington saying 17,000 people have been killed. These numbers are crazy. The numbers are crazy, and there are no Christians killing. The Jolani is not going out and abusing all minorities. It's localized to the coast, and it's focused on Alawites. And it's against the background of a rebellion against him by former Assad regime elements who are very likely backed by Iran today. So this is part of Iran's attempt to come back. And
also they would do the same.
They did do the same. This is not all of what you're seeing the Jolani people do to the Alawites is what the Alawites did to the Sunnis for 12 or 14 years. I mean, this kind of thing has been going on in Syria since 2011, and it hasn't led to outcry by Israeli ministers calling for anyone to do anything about it, right? So
neither was an outcry in America, nor was it all over the web.
Right. But my point here is that they're not really talking about the sectarian violence. It's not the sectarian violence that bothers them. What bothers them is the idea that there's a regime in Damascus that represents the majority, the ethnic majority in Syria, that's backed by the Turks, that could become a threat of Israel. So let's talk about what we're really talking about is the point. And let's discuss what the real options are about that. Not a lot of this stuff which is just propaganda. And let me point out something else to you, Gadi, which really surprised me. The Iranian regime is putting out in its official outlets, but also through its surrogates and social media, that Jolani is killing Christians, and it's depicting Assad as the defender of Christians. Tucker Carlson is going on and on about how Assad was the defender of Christians, and that the crazy neocon pro-Israeli elements who wanted to topple Assad never understood this, and now we see the reality. So what you have is, from my point of view, from the Israeli and the American strategic perspective, the most significant fact about what happened on Thursday and what's gone on over the weekend is that regime remnants backed by Iran made a push to topple Jolani, and they used the murder of Christians as a way of pulling on the heartstrings of the West to intervene on their behalf or to support policies that would weaken Jolani. That is the strategically significant fact. From a humanitarian point of view, we should be concerned about the fact that there are takfiri jihadis loosely associated or directly associated with Jolani who are carrying out depredations against civilians in the coastal provinces. It's absolutely a humanitarian concern, but it's not the number one strategic concern. The number one strategic concern is defeating Iran, and it's important that we not be manipulated. We're in a world now, Gadi, where I find, and I'm not talking about just people on Twitter. I'm talking about people who are policy professionals in Jerusalem and in Washington, where people can say the most outrageously false things about Erdogan. You know, Erdogan has a torture chamber in his basement where he is dismembering children and small animals. And I say, that's not true. And then when I say that's not true, people say back to me, why are you so pro-Erdogan? It's like, it's just crazy, dog. It's really, really crazy. There are no Christians dying. People have not died in the tens of thousands. This has not happened. And to say those things is to put yourself de facto on the same side of the Iranian propaganda machine.
I will add the emotional thing that I wanted to add, which is for Israelis now, seeing this is also a reminder of what we woke up to in October 7 after years that our elites, I was part of them for many years, tried its hardest to believe that we can find peace in this region, and that is not the case. This is why people are extremely worried, for example, by the fact that the Trump administration is talking directly to Hamas, because here we call them the Hamas Nazis. This is a Nazi regime next to us, and so the fear that all these wild barbarians, we are in danger of being engulfed by all this barbarity, is something also very emotional for Israel. So I'm adding this not because it's an argument, but because when you lay the interest of why people are making this argument based on interests that they like to conceal, it also reverberates emotionally. And a friend of mine whom a historian, told me, he said it's hard to explain to Americans what you feel when you see the fate of minorities in this region, because for Israel, we are a tiny speck on the map in this sea of barbarity, and this is barbarity. And we're living in an age where, one of the first pieces I wrote about the Obama regime, which was my entrance to Haaretz, by the way, was it was called Asur lomar et haemet. It's forbidden to say the truth. And this PC, Edward Said frame of mind, where you're not allowed to say the truth about what is going on in this region, and you're not supposed to call evil, evil, and you're not supposed to call barbarians, barbarians. That bubble has burst, and the attempt of elites in Israel to reimpose it is not going to succeed. And I hope that throughout the West, we will insist on saying the truth, because this is an asterisk remark to what you're saying. Part of Israel's struggle, Mike, is in the realm of ideas. And in the realm of ideas, the West has been telling us for decades, its elites, its academic establishment, its academia, its press, its art has been telling us that Zionism is the last vestige of a bygone retrograde colonial era. And it's the last outpost of colonialism, and it's doomed. It should be doomed. It's illegitimate. It's the end, the tail end of something horrible. And what Netanyahu has tried to say, if you analyze what he said in Congress, he is basically trying to shift the framework completely and say, no, Zionism is the forefront of the West's war against its barbarian enemies. We are not apologizing for colonialism is not what we should be doing now, because these indigenous peoples are rising to destroy the West, and we should look this in the eye. And so Israel, when he said in Congress, our war is your war, our victory will be your victory, this is what he is referring to. And since there is a struggle in the realm of ideas, all this intricate play of interest in Syria is I would say, smothered by very large generalizations, which we are trying to grapple with.
Well, look, I understand the Israeli emotions. I do, but Israel is a small country surrounded by people who don't love it, to put it mildly. And it doesn't have the luxury to make policy based on emotion. It has to be very clear-eyed about what its strategic goals are, what its strategic priorities are, and how to achieve them. And what are the tools they have at their disposal? As I said to you about the YPG in northeast Syria, the test of any policy is the potential for success. What is the possibility that Israel can do anything to prevent the killing of Alawites in northwest Syria? What's the
protect the Druze closer to our borders?
Yes, and it is doing that, and it should do that.
So let me tell you something. Let me tell you something pragmatic, Mike.
And its statements of policy should be directed at that, because once it starts talking about northeast Syria, and I'm saying this as an objective, well-informed observer, it doesn't know what the hell it's talking about.
Yeah,
It doesn't understand what's going on in northeast Syria. It doesn't understand the history there, and it doesn't understand American policy there. It's clueless, really clueless.
What I was going to suggest is not a matter of substance, but a matter of practical debate, is that if you start from you can protect the Jews, Israelis will listen to you. And I know I sent you messages. I got people who are, I'd say, friends of Israel Updates, and also consider you one of their favorite goys. Are saying, what happened to Mike? Why is he protecting this Daesh Julani? Why is he doing that?
Well, here's my question for them. Gadi, you know very well that I have been saying for years that Turkey is on the rise and that we have to deal with Turkey, right?
Yep.
That Erdogan is a fact of life that we have to deal with. He's the most powerful and influential ruler in the region. And we have, and there's no getting around that. When I say these things, people say, "Why is he so pro-Erdogan?" Like they want to, we can denounce Erdogan till the cows come home. It's not going to make him disappear. He's still going to be there. Has to be grappled with. Coming up with these fantasy proposals where who's the we are going to create a decentralized Syria. We are? Who's going to do that? How are they going to do that? I understand why that statement is emotion, why it answers the emotions that people have, but they haven't thought it. First of all, they don't know what they're talking about. They haven't spent 5 minutes thinking about Syria or following it really. And they haven't thought about what are the implications of Israel beginning to push this line. If you start thinking about it 2 and 3 steps ahead, it's not good for Israel.
All right. Shall we go to the dumbest take on the news? Or did you?
Well, we were going to talk a little bit about Hamas and
right. We were.
We should spend a couple.
Thank you for abiding by the tradition of not letting me finish.
Of being the master of anticlimax.
Yeah.
I have one big point to make about the Hamas negotiations, the Lebanon negotiations, and the Iran negotiations. So I guess we're kind of out of time. So let me just go to the one big point, if I may.
Yep.
Which is that the Netanyahu government is going along with the Americans in their mediation on Lebanon, which looks like almost a kind of revitalization of the Hochstein mediation in the past, and they are going along with the Witkoff negotiations with Hamas, and clearly the Trump administration has opened up a line directly to talk to Hamas. I think the Netanyahu. I have no information on this. I'm just my reading of the Netanyahu government in general. I think they're going along with all of this because Netanyahu has his eyes on the prize, which is destroying the Iranian nuclear program. And Donald Trump put out a Truth Social posting, as I mentioned in the news, in which he said, "Iran, sit down and negotiate, or we're going to take military action." That's a very big deal, and I suspect that is the thing that is at the forefront of the thinking of Netanyahu. He's not going to do anything at all to get on the wrong side of Donald Trump on Gaza or Lebanon, as long as that possibility is hanging out in front of him. And this is the kind of wise strategic thinking. I think this is very wise, and this is what I'm talking about, because the strategic priority for Israel and for the United States has to be to destroy the Iranian nuclear program. If that happens, the entire region, the balance of power in the entire region shifts in favor of Israel.
Yeah, I think that's true also of domestic policy, because Netanyahu, I suspect, is not happy with the tumultuous possibilities that might be the consequence of attempting to remove the Attorney General. But this is a clumsy way to say that the protest movement can erupt again along with the refusnik. Imagine, Mike, that there are people in the midst of a war refusing to denounce the weapon of refusing to serve in the IDF.
You think Yariv Levin is doing this on his own, coming up with this very elaborate process for dismissing the Attorney General? This is not. He's not been urged by Netanyahu to do this.
No way. He's been urged by Netanyahu, and the trap is, and what he can say for himself is that he is forbidden from even consulting Netanyahu on this, since there is a conflict of interest, and Netanyahu has committed to the Supreme Court that he would not have anything to do with the judiciary or with any judicial reform, and that includes the Attorney General, of course. The Attorney General in Israel is the counsel to the executive and is also the head of the prosecution, and Netanyahu is currently in trial. So he would not touch this thing with a stick. I'm sure he's not happy with it, but Yariv Levin had his reform defeated, and then he had the Supreme Court basically, it's not dethroned because it's not a throne. What do you say? He was removed as chair of the committee for appointing the president of the Supreme Court. The president of the Supreme Court basically took the committee that Yariv Levin is chairing and convened it without the Minister of Justice, Yariv Levin, and had it appoint him as the head of the Supreme Court. Yariv Levin has refused to acknowledge him as president of the Supreme Court. He would not work with him. So Yariv Levin holds a serious grudge, and he, I think, and also Gali Baharav Miara, the Attorney General, is sabotaging policy in Israel. We may. I have the dumbest take about Yair Lapid, which is the easy way out. But I could have said that the dumbest take on the news is that our Supreme Court accepted petitions submitted by NGOs with complaints from the Gazans against the proposition to stop the humanitarian aid to Hamas. So the Israeli Supreme Court is basically accepting a petition by proxy from the enemy, and it has not rejected, it has accepted it for debate. It has not said, I don't know how you say, you say in English, throw out, right? In Hebrew, you say, lidchot al asaf, to reject on the face of it, any such dealing. So we live in an Alice in Wonderland, surreal judicial regime in which our Supreme Court accepts petitions from the enemies against our war policy, supported now by Donald Trump.
I wish I was a novelist. I'd love to. The only way you can deal with this is to write humorous fiction about it, right?
Yes.
The incredible powers that the Israeli Supreme Court has and the ways it makes its decisions.
You're sprinkling salt on my wounds, Mike.
Because you are a novelist.
I should write that novel. Yeah. But things, you can't write when things are so raw.
Emotional. You guys are too emotional. Okay. Let's go to the dumbest take.
So my dumbest take, as I said, I know you run this show. You are like the Supreme Court. I'm the government, but you are
allegedly? I'm the co-host. We are separate but equal. Are we not?
You are first among equals, it turns out. You are the Attorney General in this show.
You see all the people who write in the comments and they say, why don't you let Mike talk, Gotti? Why don't you let Mike talk?
I think they say the opposite, no? Don't they say, why does Mike interfere with Gotti's...
They used to. And then
it all changed now?
Well, because they started to see the reality.
I understand. So I will go and... I used to do these things when I did children's television. We did outrageous things like leave the frame for like 30 seconds, and you'd get shouts from the control. What is happening? It was a new wave in television. So we're not going to practice this in such a prestigious podcast, but maybe we can lighten the mood with Yair Lapid again. But this is not very light. Last time it was funny because he had his
my dumb mistake isn't very funny either. Is yours a little bit funny? We'll start with mine and then we'll end.
No,
I like to end on a
not
funny
really.
note.
I think we should return to funny because this people probably want a little breath, a little break from the weight of the analysis. But this is regrettably not really funny. Yair Lapid gave a speech in which he said that the government should be honest with the Israeli public and tell them that the return to fighting is a death warrant for the hostages. This is exactly Hamas propaganda in order to prevent war. That and more, he said, counter-truthfully, that that experience has shown that using force does not bring about the release of any hostages. This is just plainly not true, because some of the hostages were released by force, and what is more, the only effective way to release the hostages, the means that brought the two deals was applying pressure when Hamas was in real distress. That's the only time that they were willing to give anything up. So it's very distressing that we keep talking about this, Mike, because outside Israel, people think Israel's and has its interests and now it's fighting. It's also achieving a lot. It's doing well in the war. They don't realize how torn Israel is and how horrendous the incessant pressure of the anti-Bibi wild demonstration, the manipulation of emotions around the hostage issue, are tearing Israeli society apart brutally. And these people say repeatedly, some of their leaders, the leaders of the protest, say repeatedly that the real enemy is Benjamin Netanyahu and Hamas is a problem we can deal with. And so this has been, it's hanging like a dark cloud over all of us, that in the middle of a war that was clearly a war for survival, when it also seemed that survival was not assured, they were wildly attacking a wartime government struggling to ensure Israel's survival. It's just, it's sickening. And it's been, it's been like heavy on our chests for months now. So this is a dumb mistake. It's a dumb thing to say. You should not say such a thing when Israel is clearly getting ready to resume hostilities.
Okay, my dumb mistake. I'll just do it really briefly. Also, not funny. I wanted to highlight that Thomas Massey, congressman from Kentucky, gave an interview with Judge Napolitano, where he basically said that complained about the inordinate power and influence of the Israel lobby in Washington, and it highlighted the mainstreaming since October 7th of anti-Semitism in our system, but I thought his take was dumb. But what I thought was also interesting is that Donald Trump put out a Truth Social posting against Massey, saying he's going to primary him, and that Massey is a prima donna, grandstander of a kind that we've seen before, and he needs to go. Now, Trump wasn't responding directly to the interview that Massey gave about the power of the Israel lobby. He has his own agenda with Massey, but I thought it was interesting because I think that the system is starting to correct itself a little bit. There was also,
as it pertains to anti-Semitism, you mean?
As it pertains to anti-Semitism and the fringe, what used to be the fringe right, there's been mainstreaming of fringe right views in the last couple of years. Another one I saw was Tucker Carlson was lampooned by the Babylon Bee where it showed Tucker Carlson interviews Saruman about the warlike intentions of Rohan, the references to the Lord of the Rings, Saruman being a corrupt wizard, and Rohan being the elf army, which is the elf army, which is fighting against Sauron. And
that also used to be the line of attack from the left on Tucker Carlson, right? It's not that different.
No, it's not. No, it's not that different. But now it's coming from Babylon B. I feel like things are shifting a little bit, and it's. I think it's actually good news. The American public, I don't believe that the anti-Israel conspiracy theorists on the right are representative of the population as a whole. I don't believe they're representative of the vast majority of Trump's constituents, and I don't believe that they are representative of Trump's thinking at all. And I think that we're going to see course corrections in this regard. All these people all they can do is denounce Israel and say, no, don't do this, don't do that. They can't tell the president what to do. They don't have a positive agenda. And in order to make policy, you have to have a sense of where you want to go. What are we trying to achieve? What's possible? And so on. And I don't think they have a realistic agenda. And I think people are going to, as Trump starts to put together his realistic agenda and his goals, and he sees where those people stand on them, I think they're going to get more and more marginalized. That's my prediction. There may be a little bit of wishful thinking in there, but maybe not.
And so, Mike, with your permission, can we talk about the readers' comments, listeners?
Oh yes, absolutely. You can go to readers' comment. I have them here.
You already told us that they are demanding that I don't interrupt your monologues. What else do they want?
Hold on a second. I got to find them. Where are they? Oh! I hope I didn't close them out here. No, here we go. Here we go. So, Gotti, this is from 4x6GP. Yeah. Gotti, what precisely can happen to loosen the grip of the judicial, media, legal security complex over the country? Elections don't seem to matter. What do we need to do? Tell us in one sentence, please.
I think that's a reaction partly to my appearance on the Mark Levin show. It was shared by Netanyahu, by the way.
Yes, probably was. I have another comment here about that. Do you want to hear that?
So this is a question. I'll say very briefly, because I don't think the maneuvering by Yariv Levin or others is going to solve the problem. But I think that the hubris of the Supreme Court and the power that they have, the authority they have without any accountability, they don't pay a price for anything, is causing them to radicalize. And at one point, politicians are going to say, stop. I thought we have reached that point. I wrote it on Twitter, and I said, this is the chance that the government has to say, you cannot debate the humanitarian aid, and you cannot decide whether Israel would stop it or not stop it. And therefore, whatever you decide on this issue we are not going to follow. We're not going to debate you on this. We're going to do what we think is Israel's interest. This is not happening, regrettably. But I think that, and this is an issue that could have been a good opportunity, because the public would support it. The public doesn't like the idea that we are supplying our enemies with fuel and with control of humanitarian aid. So you can view this as a miniature of what I think can be the real and the big drama, is that they are going to decide something so outrageous that politicians are just going to say stop. That's the only way that I see that this will break.
Okay, so Stephen Rosenberg 5998, he said, Gotti did a great job on Life, Liberty, and Levin on Fox. I never thought of the Israeli judiciary as a Politburo, but it makes sense. I have a request. Can you spend a few minutes each episode giving us updates on something you reported in a previous episode? I appreciate that change here comes out of a fire hose, and it's easy to get caught chasing after what's new. Examples, what's the situation with Turkey? The leak of documents to Netanyahu? What happened to the person who was detained? You go into depth on a topic 1 week and then it completely disappears. There must be a way to update the news. That's very difficult to do. Do you have thoughts about that, Gotti?
I think we did it to the extent that it's possible in the fact that we referred back to what the Shabak and IDF were covering up and updated you on that topic. I think, we do that when there are new developments, and we do assume that there is some continuity. The episodes are standalones, but we do assume that many of our viewers and listeners know the context from previous episodes.
I think we could also maybe do more each week. If we move to a tiered system, maybe a subscriber system, and then we could individually put out little updates over the course of the week. Anyway, something to think about. That's a discussion you and I should have offline. But we could do something like that, maybe. Mike, you're starting to worry me as an apologist for both Turkey, who clearly had their troops directly involved in Syria, and now Qatar. Next to Iran, the biggest supporter of Islamic radicals, including Hamas. Fess up. What can I say? We talk about this all the time.
I don't think we need to go back there again. You convinced us that people are saying that to you.
Yeah, we can continue to talk about it. It's not a big deal. It's nothing new. Finally, Gotti, Sigmund Silber 2210 wants to know, does Gotti own a suit?
I own a jacket. I own a jacket when I was, as Mike knows.
You have a tie too, don't you?
Now I have a tie after you.
You were given a tie. You were given a tie.
We have a friend. Her name is Susie, and she helped me. I didn't know how to tie a tie, so along with Liel from a tablet, both these parties helped me tie a tie so that I can moderate a panel at the prestigious Hertog Forum at the Hudson Institute.
I think you need some more suits and ties. I mean, how can you be an adult without them?
In Israel, Ben Gurion is right behind you, and although he did not wear this specific shirt, Ben Gurion was unaccustomed to putting a tie, except on the occasion when he declared Israel's independence. But he made a point of showing that he was tanned. There was a tanned triangle on below his neck on his chest. So
because he's a worker.
Because he's a worker. He was a worker for 2 months.
Anu banu arza livnot velehibanot.
Okay, now you have to translate that. You can't just get away with it.
We came to the land to build and to be built.
Exactly. Zionism in a nutshell. So that is it from us now. If you complained about our absence, now you have an earful of us, and we will be back. I think, Mike, that we will have to shift the days because of my university schedule this semester. So we will probably start recording towards the ends of the week.
Wait. So Wednesday, I thought we were going to do it on Wednesdays now. No, we're going to do it on Thursday or Friday?
2 weeks from now, I'm starting to teach on Wednesdays. So we need
so we're going to probably move to Thursday.
But we'll save you our scheduling dilemmas and just present you with the outcome when it is there.
In the meantime, you should, speaking to the audience, they should like us, subscribe, and leave a comment. Preferably a positive one, but we will take criticism.
You're a very competitive guy. Do you want to create a system where they can like us separately?
Sure. Yeah, I don't mind. I know they're going to like you more than me because I'm a Hamas apologist, Galutnik Jew. I can't remember what it was.
I was being ironic, but apparently Because
I missed it. I'm sorry. Being a Galudnik Jew, whatever, I don't have a sense of irony like you.
The would-be Jew. So that's all from us. Thank you for listening, and we will be here with you next week with another episode of Israel Update.